Okay. I got off of the thyroid treatment when I was having some great years in my 40s. But yeah, I know it's pretty bad right now. I do hope to get treatment. I do hope to get down there to Fort Myers, which is difficult financially. I'm out trying to DoorDash this morning and I'm getting 0 offers. Absolutely nothing for over an hour now, which has left me looking on the internet at the kind of thing I tend to look at. There's always either just escapism, like looking at beautiful pieces of property for sale that I can't afford, or uh, that's my dream thing. I would love to have some land and start learning to raise my own food, but obviously I'm not really healthy enough to hold together hardly anything in life, much less a farm. But hopefully someday. But the other thing on the internet, which I've been looking at this morning, is I look at a lot of political and social commentary. So I just watched Kash Patel's full remarks after he was sworn in, which were really good remarks. That was encouraging to watch. And before that, the latest episode by Andrew Klavan. So totally giving away here early on that I am quite interested in all those types of issues, and I feel pretty passionately about hoping things are better for everybody in the future. Um, I really, I really care about the world, and I really care about what's good and what's right. And as bad off as I have been all the time, getting worse and worse for a few years now, I also see so many other people are suffering. Sorry, I I work with young people, young adults, all the time. I teach driving, and I have to quit doing that. I really, really want some respite from that job, just even for the safety of my students, because of what if something that's like a glitch in the brain from the brain fog happens while I'm on the road. But I love working with the young adults, the teenagers. I get people of all ages, but because our society is not healthy, because you can see it going down and down and down over the last 10 years that I've been doing this, I see very few healthy young people. I think even all the young people who I know that they think they're relatively healthy and they're relatively normal, which in their perspective they would be. It's a norm in our society to be the way they are now, but they're not healthy. They're very much not healthy. It's extremely rare for me to have a young person with me who, on a drive, who is actually healthy, and or at least appears completely to be. I get a lot of people who can't sit for 2 hours in a car without getting lots of different pain problems, sometimes really practically begging for a rest, that we should get out and walk for a couple of minutes by the half hour or 45-minute mark. I get lots of young people who have a variety of diagnoses and or sort of Dr. Google diagnoses, which are clearly things that do have some merit. They're not doing great physically and mentally usually. So people who tell you they're suffering from depression, and they'll give you really good clues of how that plays out, you can tell. I've had severe depression a lot in my life. I know when people tell you they're having dark, intrusive thoughts, that's an incredibly serious thing that's very, very hard to deal with. I don't want to ever get into talking in a video, putting out just how terrible the thoughts can be and just how scary they can be. Most young people today tend to have some level of anxiety problem, and that's okay. In terms of, I can work with them, I can try to help them feel comfortable in the car and learn to drive anyway, which is one of my thoughts about things, that I would love to have the information out to parents that so many people can't afford driver's ed. But because the parents have anxiety, and or because the student has anxiety, a lot of people are not learning to drive because of that, or they're inhibited from learning to drive from that. And I think I could help some with that. And it could help to put some of that at least I believed I was doing some good in the world in this job. That could help to put some of that out there to help people, even if I'm able to get out of the job myself. Um, so anyway, I'm feeling pretty good this morning at the moment. I mean, relatively speaking, everything is relative. For a woman who feels really sick and has a lot of pain every single day for years now, My mornings are my best time. I think I got about 6.5 hours of sleep. I did not go home last night, which is, well, you do what you got to do. Everybody's suffering so much financially right now after 4 years of just, well, 5 years really, of just utter destruction of whatever it is with the people who are motivated to try to destroy the economy like had been being done. I don't know. There's no use getting into what are these people thinking who want to kill the rest of us, but it's been really bad financially, and obviously, as you can imagine, if you're sick, you're going to have a harder time. If you're having problems with how your brain is functioning, you're going to have an even harder time. That's why we see such an increase in homelessness of people who were on the bottom rung and couldn't hold on through really, really bad times. And then there's people like me who not homeless yet, but just like the last 5 months in a row and a couple of different months last winter and a month or two the winter before that, homelessness is knocking on the door. I don't know 7 days from now if I'll make it through when all the bills are kind of all due at once at the end of a month, beginning of the next month. At the moment, it seems like not, which, like I said, just keeps happening because that's the way the economy is, and that's how far down close to the bottom rung that I was with all these health problems. But at least it's morning right now. Right now I can kind of think to at least get all this rambly, overly long thing out there, which probably nobody will ever see, and that's okay. But in case maybe some one person with brain fog catches onto it someday, and in case this track I'm on trying to look into chronic inflammatory response syndrome, as I was diagnosed with, in case that helps and I get better, there will be a little documentation of what's going on with it. I'm sitting out in front of a Dunkin' Donuts in Brandon, Florida, not really all that close to where I live, because where I live in Polk County, there's very little benefit or realistic possible outcome to door dashing as a side gig. But since clients in the winter are harder to come by, harder to come by teaching driver's ed, and there's generally lots in the summer, I've started taking Fridays and Saturdays off. The way the scheduling for my job is done is really almost impossible to have any benefit to myself from anything on the side without just completely having the day off. And at least here I don't have one of my wonderful young people in the car. Well, I have that possibility of what if I just get glitchy? What if my brain doesn't work today? What if somebody gets hurt? So I really needed a rest and a break from the driver's ed, and I think it was the responsible, right thing to do to start trying to work my way out of that. Sorry about all the sorry about the fact that I'm so not used to looking into a camera and I keep shifting my eyes all over the place. But as you can see, my skin is still messed up. I have this thing that I don't know how well it's showing for y'all that been there since I was about 38. Even during my great years in my 40s, I never got rid of the one patch of whatever that is. I never went and got it diagnosed. I was getting more and more from my early 30s until now, up until 2020, just not thinking great of doctors, not trusting doctors very much for all the harm that had been done over the years. And in so many different ways, and some very specific to how unhealthy and sickly I seem to be, but also just in general. When my mom passed away, seeing what cancer treatment does to people and knowing that for the one and only time I ever got a mammogram, which I would never do again, from a million things, the antibiotic merry-go-round I'd been on before, and a million things I've seen people go through that are not even all that close to home, like things I've experienced myself and or going through the cancer journey in hospice with my mom. There's zero chance that there's a norm in the medical establishments or institutions that they want to do no harm. There's no chance whatsoever that that's the norm of that profession. You don't want to just think horribly of all doctors, but you have to be realistic and see there's harm being done at a million different levels all the time on a regular basis. And then of course 2020 happened, and now there's beginning to be this broad discussion coming out about nobody trusts their doctor anymore. And I did move even much further. I tried for years to be very aware, like, oh, I might be going too far. And if I would come out when I'm talking to people to say, oh, yeah, I might be pretty crazy about this. I might be too pretty extreme. I really don't trust doctors. But I would try to say something positive. Like, I think in Western medicine, one of the really apex cool, amazing things we can do in our modern era is how well trauma surgery and just surgical technique in general has come to be able to, it's amazing the lives that can be saved after so much harm to a human body. But despite having that decision in my head and ability to keep trusting there's some good to it, and even to know when I was a kid, I believe my life was saved by doctors over and over and over, which may or may not have been their right decision, since they kept hurting my quality of life over the years. But I think what I had as a young person that kept putting me in and out of the hospital got a name later, or had a name then, and we just didn't know. But I've seen it on the internet once or twice in recent years, that people talk about something called cyclical vomiting syndrome. And that is something that, from what I saw on the internet, seems to describe what I used to go through and what my parents used to go through. That if I would get sick with a bug, and like I've mentioned, I think I probably mentioned it in my last video, that my immune system is wacky and weak, and I get sick easily. I get sick all the time. I've had this immune system all my life. I'm used to the fact that sickness is a part of life. It just is. And I'm used to the fact that, hey, it's the way it is. I might die. Death is a part of life. I've been to funerals. My parents didn't protect me from it, which I think is a bad idea for people to do, to be honest. But whatever is going on in life, the whole family experiences the life, instead of trying to teach the children to be so protected that they don't know what life is. So between just being raised right to understand life and trained to understand it like parents are supposed to do, and the fact that I was sick and in and out of the hospital and nearly dead sometimes, it's just a sort of, I'm not really afraid of anything. I'm certainly not afraid of death. There's different degrees of something might affect you and you might feel some emotions of it. And so to just say I'm not afraid at all is probably not really accurate. It's not like I never have a moment of fear, or a feeling of anxiety or tension or anything. But in general, it's still accurate and valid to say I'm not really afraid of much, except for I have a fear, one single. Like, I'm afraid of that kind of thing, which is, weirdly enough, I'm afraid of jellyfish. A long story behind that, but mostly I don't experience much fear in life. And I've noticed in 2020, when my brother, who was really way out there with where he had gone with what he believes in life and the things he would advocate for and all the, we were polar opposites, but I had called him. No, he called me. Anyway, we were talking on the phone, which didn't happen super often, but we lived in different states, and for some reason, the way he was talking, it sounded like he knew I was sick. And this is right when I had COVID. I really did have COVID in the very early days, right when the lockdowns had started in the state I lived in at the time. It was almost the same day that the lockdowns were announced that I developed my symptoms. But anyway, I had COVID early when there weren't even test kits, and had to talk through it with the doctor on the phone and all that. The weirdest illness ever. It didn't feel like anything else, even remotely, which is part of how I sort of knew. That's probably what the doctor would say, was that it probably was COVID. Yeah, he was pretty sure too, even though I wasn't really getting the cough that everybody else was getting. But I was used to all those good years in my 40s just making homemade broth and drinking tons of homemade broth, and never eating sugar, and didn't even have any kind of man-made refined sugars in my house, except I think a little bottle of maple syrup that I never use at the time. And I also had those years of good years, and before them, trying to get health, that I had been doing research, and so I was used to reading between the lines, researching, figuring out people's biases, figuring out what's worth trying and what's not. And I really was reading into it early on, when people were sort of guessing and didn't know, but were trying to reason out what was going on. I mean, looking at people who have good sense, not the general COVID reaction insanity that was happening, that was so clearly not useful and not good. but so people were talking about the fact that the illness seemed to be causing something they were calling cytokine storm, which I wasn't super familiar with before that. But like I said, I had some sources I would go to, the kind of sources that the internet and the tech moguls don't want people to ever see. Like, oh, don't do your own research. Oh, you read? How crazy? Why would you read? And I was used to the fact that those things got censored, because it was actually quite a few years before that when some of my favorite sources began to get censored by whatever is going wrong in the heads and hearts of the people who work for and run companies like Google. It was a long time before that when some of my favorites started to get censored and shut down by people who think it's cool to just go, oh, we think those people are wrong and we can just stop them from spreading whatever harm we think they're doing. And of course, that's probably not really the motivation, even though that's what they say, because that doesn't even make any sense. So outside of reality, given how much good they do, given how much some of us were able to claw our way back up to health enough to have those good years I had in my 40s. But anyway, sometimes you can figure out how to go find the person who will never show up in the search results again. And one of my favorites is a person who followed the Weston A. Price style of life. And I think she lives in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is kind of funny since I live down here in Central Florida now. And I think I went and read some of her site. I can't remember who all else I went to read. But anyway, I remember they were talking about the cytokine storm. Sorry about how rambly I get. And in the cytokine storm, let me pause that and come back to it.